Everyone, we've got a quorum of three commissioners here, and we will go ahead and get started. The first item on the agenda is the presentation of the Your Waterfront, Your Way report. Just to set a little bit of the background, I asked for this report because I wanted to make sure that we got as much information from residents throughout the city as to their views, attitudes toward our waterfront. This is a citywide asset. It is not possessed by those who live nearest the waterfront. It is truly an asset of the entire city, and I wanted to make sure that we had information concerning as broad of a swath of our residents as possible, their views toward what they wanted to see in the waterfront. So having said that, Ms. Johnson, did you want to add anything to that, and we can dive right in?
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning. For the record, Faye Johnson, City Administrator. This is the culmination, as the Mayor indicated, really a two-year community visioning initiative on our waterfront, and we've entitled this effort as Your Waterfront, Your Way initiative, which is going to then be rolled up into the report. The board will hear from the team of consultants that have been working with us over the last 2 years. We're kind of going to walk through the report by different areas, and as the board will note, the report is pretty extensive. It's an 89-page report, so we're not going to go through it page by page. Each consultant will cover their specific area of involvement in the initiative, and subsequent to the work session, the report will be posted so that it can be reviewed by members of the public. I'm not going to go through an overview of how the initiative started, in that that's going to be covered by the first presenter, which is actually our Housing and Community Development Civic Engagement Supervisor, Charity Lewis. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Lewis.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Charity Lewis. I am the Civic Engagement Supervisor for the City of West Palm Beach in the Department of Housing and Community Development. Thank you all for being here today. You're going to learn a little bit more about the Your Waterfront, Your Way report. Today we'll be sharing, as Ms. Johnson stated, a high-level overview of the report. We're not going to go through every page. Instead, we will focus on key findings from the research and engagement process, themes that emerged through the community input, and the recommendations and opportunities identified by the project team. Our goal is to give you a clear understanding of what we learned and how this work can guide next steps for the future of the downtown. I want to begin by introducing our project team. This initiative was led by the city's Department of Housing and Community Development and supported by an outstanding group of consultants who played a key role in shaping this project. Here with us today, we have Tony Garcia and Cassie McDonald from Street Plans. They led our technical analysis, urban planning expertise, and recommendations to guide the future of our waterfront. We also have Charisma Adams of Articulate Consulting. She led our community engagement and outreach efforts and ensured that we heard directly from residents, businesses, and visitors. We also have with us today Angela Biaggi of WGI. Her team supported the project through data collection and analysis, including growth and trends, economic conditions, foot traffic, and visitor behavior. Also on the project team, we had Wen Deng of DDEC, who also provided additional data-driven insights on mobility and access, identifying opportunities for improvement for moving forward. We also want to acknowledge the many City of West Palm Beach departments that contributed historical knowledge and data on that project area, as well as those that currently operate within the project area and those that may operate in the area in the future during implementation of recommendations. There were also various organizations and businesses and the residents, workers, and visitors that participated. This project brought together community feedback and data to help shape a shared vision for the future of the downtown waterfront between the Flagler Memorial Bridge to the north, the Royal Park Bridge to the south, Olive Avenue to the west, and then the Intracoastal Waterway to the east. Through outreach, surveys, and analysis, three main themes emerged: implementing quick impact initiatives, re-envisioning the waterfront as a unified premier open space, and adopting a waterfront stewardship model. These themes reflect the community's priorities and support the city's commitment to an inclusive, vibrant downtown waterfront. Mayor James envisions the city of West Palm Beach as a city of opportunity and inclusivity for all. Your Waterfront Your Way reflects this vision by ensuring the community played a meaningful role in shaping the future of our downtown waterfront. Under his leadership, this engagement process was designed to gather diverse perspectives and create a waterfront that reflects guiding principles that are vibrant, collaborative, resilient, and welcoming, meeting the needs of residents, businesses, and visitors today while also planning responsibly for the future. At its core, this project affirms a simple truth: our waterfront is a waterfront for all. Now I'm going to move into the project overview of the report. This report serves as a blueprint for the future of the downtown waterfront, highlighting key opportunities and challenges to guide a shared community vision. You may ask, why now? As our downtown continues to grow, now is the time to make thoughtful updates that strengthen the waterfront as a vibrant, welcoming, and connected public space. This report builds on past planning efforts covering urban planning, zoning, transportation, economic development, placemaking, and resiliency, along with data analysis and community feedback to outline both immediate improvements and long-term strategies for a resilient, community-centered waterfront. Over the past 30 years, many plans, studies, and analyses have been conducted of our waterfront and downtown area. As part of this project, the team reviewed and incorporated key findings from those previous efforts to ensure that this work builds on the strong foundation already in place while also addressing emerging needs. Throughout this report, you will see several terms used to describe different parts of the downtown West Palm Beach waterfront. To ensure clarity, I'd like to point out a few of those terms. Project area / waterfront, as shown in the colored area on the map to the left. This refers to the section of the downtown West Palm Beach bounded by the project area, which is Flagler Memorial Bridge to the north, the Royal Park Bridge to the south, Olive Avenue to the west, and then the Intracoastal Waterway to the east. Also, I'd like to point out when signature public spaces are referred to, that means public areas identified as key programmatic areas. These may vary depending on context, however, typically will include the sections of North and South Clematis located east of Narcissus Avenue, Nancy M. Graham, Centennial Square, the Centennial Fountain, and the Great Lawn and the Meyer Amphitheater. And then lastly, Waterfront Promenade. This refers specifically to the pedestrian walkway along Flagler Drive, and between Flagler Drive and the seawall. And now I am going to turn it over to Angela Biaggi of WGI.
Thank you. Okay, good morning. So we started the study out by looking at demographics and identified different growths and trends within the waterfront area. This was important because it really played into that you'll hear from Charisma later, the types of outreach that we did, making sure that we're understanding who we're engaging with, who we need to engage with, and that we're getting an appropriate cross-section during those engagement activities. So we found that in general, we looked at the different types of households that were in the waterfront. Generally speaking, we have less families in the waterfront area than we do citywide. That was one of the findings that we came across. As far as age demographics, the population in the waterfront area, their age is significantly higher than that of the rest of the city, as well as the median price of the home is also significantly higher than that elsewhere in the city. But then we also found that the household income and the net worth is a little bit lower than outside of the city. So you see those statistics here. And looking at race and ethnicity, primarily the residents of the waterfront are primarily white, which differs from the rest of the city where we have a much more diverse population throughout. And I'll let Charisma kind of speak to how that went into some of the community engagement and how that influenced her work.
Thank you, Angela. Good morning.
Good morning.
Again, my name is Charisma Adams, and I look over the outreach and engagement for the city residents, as well as the visitors and the stakeholders. On this first slide, in this next section, we're just going to walk you through the outreach and engagement side of this project, who we heard from, how we reached them, and why you all can feel confident in the results that you'll see today. Your Waterfront Your Way wasn't designed as a one-time snapshot. It was built as an ongoing conversation with residents, businesses, visitors, and community partners. So as you look at the feedback and the recommendations later, I want you to have that in the back of your mind, that these ideas are rooted in real stories, real usage patterns, and real data from the community. As we look at this slide, this gives you a sense of the timeline of engagement. When we were out talking to people and what phase of work we were in. You'll see when we started in late 2023 with visioning and community engagement, that's when we really began listening to the residents as they answered the question, what does a successful waterfront look like to you? From there, we moved into draft goals and strategies, and each step layered in more detail, bringing early feedback that we were able to test and refine over time. By the time we reached the plan release, over a year and a half had passed. So this wasn't a one-week sprint. This was engagement tracked alongside technical work over multiple months, which is part of what gives this report so much depth. Here you can see the toolbox that we used to reach the people. It wasn't just one public meeting and a survey. We layered multiple methods. We had community surveys, public meetings, walkabouts along the waterfront, small group stakeholder interviews, internal staff meetings, social media outreach, and formal data analysis on the back end. Each of these tools brought something very different. Surveys gave us breadth and numbers. Public meetings and walkabouts gave us stories, tone, and body language. Stakeholder interviews helped us understand the operational and economic realities, and behavioral data analysis helped us tie it all together. We also issued all marketing materials and surveys. They were produced in English, Spanish, and Creole, and so we wanted to make sure that no resident was excluded in our outreach from our very diverse city. Also, we intentionally focused door-to-door outreach on communities with low digital access, limited transportation options, and historically low engagement on past projects. So residents who are usually the last to be heard were centered in this process. The big idea is we met people in different ways, depending on how they naturally engage, online, in person, casually at the waterfront, and in more formal settings. We did that on purpose, because the people who attend a formal meeting at 6 p.m. on a weekday are not always the same people that you'll stop and talk to at the Movie on the Lawn event, or a person who will complete a survey at their front door. This variety helped us hear from people who don't usually get to stand in front of you all with a microphone. This is where we start the scale of the engagement. Across everything we did, we engaged about 1,745 people in local city events, mostly in the waterfront area. On top of that, we had about 698 social media touches, over 600 flyers out in the community. Many were sent out at, we did churches, we did local convenience stores throughout the neighborhoods, we did retail establishments and restaurants. Several published articles, multiple public meetings helped to inform people and invite them into the process. Like I said, we went door to door, visiting more than 1,300 residents, and we reached over 1,500 unique visitors to the project website. We layered in major waterfront events. We spent 17 days at large events like the Boat Show and the Art Festival. We sent more than 50,000 emails to share about the project and request opportunities to give input. So these numbers aren't abstract. They represent real touch points with residents, workers, and visitors across multiple formats. On this survey slide, you can see we'd had 1,605 survey responses, and that's a very solid data set for this type of planning effort. About 65% of respondents live within West Palm Beach city limits. So we're hearing from people who know this place and use it regularly. You'll also notice the satisfaction numbers. There's a mix. Over half are happy with the waterfront, and nearly the same amount feel that there's definitely room for improvement. But that tension is what makes this initiative so important. On the right, you'll see public meetings and walkabouts. We had 3 public meetings, 169 attendees. We had 477 YouTube views for those who could not be in the room at those meetings. We had 2 walkabouts with 24 attendees who participated. In addition to the broader public, we also spend a lot of time with stakeholders who live and work in the waterfront every day: city departments, agencies, organizations, and local businesses. We held over 24 stakeholder meetings and worked directly with more than 16 organizations and businesses, from city departments to local institutions and waterfront operators. We also received over 27 memos and emails that captured more detailed feedback, things like operational constraints, safety concerns, programming ideas, and long-term vision. These conversations helped us understand not just what people wish for, but what it would actually take to run, maintain, and program a successful waterfront over time. So when you put all of the outreach together, the story is high volume, diverse methods, and a mix of everyday users and institutional partners, all feeding into the outcome of this report. And so now we'll look at some more data from Angela.
So when we started looking at visitor behaviors, foot traffics, economic insights, we utilized a data analytics platform called Placer AI. So this is not data the city's collecting itself or anything that the city was involved with. This is a company that basically utilizes different types of location-enabled apps and aggregates that data to give us this information. So this gives us kind of a snapshot of what's going on in the downtown. And I just want to give a couple definitions as we move through this that we use throughout the report. So a visitor is defined as someone who visits the waterfront. It's an individual. A visit is something that is 10 minutes or more in the waterfront, and a visitor could have multiple visits. A resident visitor is an individual that lives in the waterfront area but then also visits the waterfront. Non-resident visitors are those that are outside of the waterfront area. City visitors we defined as someone who's coming from within a 10-mile radius but doesn't necessarily live in the waterfront. And then a distant visitor is someone who's visiting from outside of that 10-mile radius. So those are terms that are used throughout the report. So some of the high-level findings were that we found that generally the visitors to the waterfront tend to be younger. They tend to be pretty high-earning, more affluent than others. And that these visitors are mostly coming from that larger than the 10-mile radius area, and that generally we're finding they're coming from the state of Florida. They're within the state. The state's still driving the most visitors. So we're showing this as really a regional destination for people, still coming from those larger out-of-state, out-of-town visitors as well. But really the primary driver is Florida residents. As far as visitation times and patterns, we do see that nights and weekends are very popular along the waterfront area, particularly during the summer months. And that we really also were able to see the impact of the larger programming and events that the city holds. So the Sunfest, the boat show, the Sandy Tree. We saw that the programming of those events influenced the visits, not just to the waterfront, but then to the larger downtown as a whole as well. As far as frequency of the visits and who's kind of engaging, residents did have the most frequency of visits to the waterfront, but maybe they were a little bit of a shorter visit. Citywide visitors, those that are within that 1 to 10 mile range, also made up a large part of that. And the regional visitors, the distant visitors, were also very important. So again, we're showing that this is a mix of a neighborhood destination, but also still has the very importance of that regional draw. And then their activities during and after those visits, people aren't just coming to the waterfront and then leaving. They're going to other locations outside of the waterfront area, either before or after those visits. So again, showing that importance of how this is kind of a catalyst for different trips and economic activity throughout the city. As far as different types of consumer insights, we did find that the spending of the visitors who are coming and staying and spending their money here, on average, they're spending much more, not much, but they're spending more in the food and entertainment areas, in the retail, and in the transportation. They're spending higher amounts than they would statewide in other areas. So this is kind of an interesting economic insight that we saw through this as well. So kind of looking at kind of next steps and what this taught us and what we found from this, we were able to identify different areas of the city that were, I would say, sort of recipients of this activity from the waterfront area. So you look at Clematis, you look at Banyan, maybe some parts of Flagler where there was a lot of concentrated activity resulting from the visits to the waterfront. But then there are some spaces that we identified where there's some opportunities for improvement or engagement or different types of programming where they, areas that we could probably look at improving some visits. So just as some recommendations were, the residents of the waterfront area are the most frequent and the biggest users, so they're really treating this as their neighborhood. City visitors are bringing some of that increased spending power and economic activity that maybe isn't coming directly from the waterfront residents, but coming from in that 1 to 10 mile radius. And those distant visitors, the ones that are coming from even further outside of the 10 miles, are really driving some of the larger economic impacts as well, with the hotels, with the restaurants, and with these larger events. So kind of a mix of a neighborhood destination, but then also really reflecting the importance of this as a destination, as a regional destination that people are really beginning to see it as.
So earlier I talked about how we engage people. Now we're going to shift into what we learned and how we stitched all of this community feedback, stakeholder insights, and hard data together. So this table right here on the right lays out the 3 main lenses that we used. Surveys and public meetings, which were people telling us directly what they want and how they feel. Foot traffic and behavioral data was how people were actually moving, how they were lingering, and how they were actually using the space. And then other data sets like economic indicators and demographic information, like Angela shared, helped us understand who's present and what's at stake. The surveys give us voice and preference. The foot traffic and behavioral data gives us patterns and reality. And the additional data sets give us context, who's benefiting and who might be left out. So the point of this section is we didn't just rely on one type of feedback. We checked what people said against what they actually did and then what the data shared. This slide zooms in on foot traffic and behavioral data. Essentially, who is actually showing up in the waterfront, when and how they're using it. The data shows patterns like where people cluster, which area stays underused, what times of day and days of the week are busiest, how much time people spend when they come. And why that matters is simple. It tells us where the waterfront is already doing its job well and where it's leaving opportunity on the table. We then compare those patterns with what community members and stakeholders told us. Where the maps and comments line up, we know we have strong alignment. Where they don't, that's where we have a gap or a blind spot, and we need to dig into that. And so from here, the next few slides will break this down into 4 pieces: physical design, access, programming, and stewardship, and show where perspectives shared and where they diverged. Topic 1 is physical design, how the waterfront looks, feels, and functions on the ground. On the left, you'll see the list of existing conditions, things like public amenities, signature spaces, shade, visual connections, and access to the water. On the right, we're going to look at the summary of the different perspectives. The community feedback focused a lot on comfort, more shade, more seating, better restrooms, and a general hesitation about dramatic changes to the skyline or character. The stakeholder memos emphasized infrastructure that can support events, transit, and daily use, also highlighting lighting, signage, durable materials, and clear layouts. Behavioral data shows that people cluster in shaded, comfortable areas and at well-designed nodes, while some spaces are consistently underused. The shared ground here is pretty clear. Everyone supports improvements that make the waterfront more comfortable, more shaded, and easier to use. Where there's tension is around the scale and the intensity of that change. How much do you add? How tall? How built out? So that's a place where careful design and communication will be critical. The next section is access. How easy is it to get to the waterfront and move along it, whether you're walking, driving, biking, or arriving by transit or boat? Community feedback here includes concerns about parking, wayfinding, and safety. Things like crossing Flagler Drive, navigating intersections, feeling comfortable walking, especially at night with kids. Stakeholders on their side are looking at transit connections, traffic operations, ADA accessibility. They want better routes, safer crossings, and clearer systems for all nodes. Behavioral data shows where people are actually coming in and where the system is underperforming. For example, there are high volumes at certain crossings and very little usage in other spots. The shared perspective is access needs to be safer, cleaner, and more connected, not just for cars, but for people also on foot, bikes, and using mobility devices. The gap is an emphasis. Some people are prioritizing noise, parking, and driving. Others focus more on walking, biking, and transit. So the design challenge is balancing those needs without sacrificing public space quality. The third topic is programming. What's actually happening on the waterfront? Events, dining, retail, arts, recreation. Community feedback here is pretty consistent. People want more everyday community-oriented events, things that are family-friendly, affordable, and spread throughout the year, not just big one-off events. Stakeholders see programming as both a community benefit and an economic tool. They're thinking about how do we attract visitors, how do we support local businesses, and how do we create a strong brand for the waterfront. Behavioral data shows that there are big spikes during large events and quieter periods in between, which confirms that the waterfront is very event-driven right now. The shared ground is everyone agrees that the waterfront should be active and inviting. It should not sit empty. The tension is, how do we balance major events with smaller, more frequent community-scale programming so that residents feel that this is their waterfront every day, not just when there's a festival? The last topic is stewardship. Who's taking care of this place day in and day out? Community feedback calls out very real concerns around cleanliness, trash, homelessness, nighttime safety, and lighting. People want to see that the waterfront is cared for and that there's a visible management presence. Stakeholder memos talked about the complexity of managing a patchwork of public and private areas, the need for dedicated staff, and the importance of clear roles and funding for maintenance, programming, and security. Behavioral data backs this up. In areas that feel less maintained or less safe, they see lower, shorter stay use. The shared perspective here is that the waterfront needs stronger, more unified management and stewardship, not just project by project, but as a whole system. The gap is really about the how. What type of stewardship model, who's at the table, and how is it funded? That's where future policy and your organizational decisions will come in. So these four topics really reveal the heart of the community. What they're asking for is a waterfront that is beautiful, accessible, lively, and well cared for. They also show you where thoughtful balancing will matter most. In the next section with Tony, we'll hear the next big ideas that will grow directly from everything that the community shared with us.
Good morning.
Morning.
I think that's a really great sort of framing of everything, and you can almost write the report yourself based off of what you just heard, right? the balancing of the data and what we heard from the community and the different stakeholders really led to what you're about to see. So to reiterate the three major themes, and as I go through these big picture items, it's not just one thing, right? They overlap. There's going to be clear overlap between some of the programming items and some of the stewardship items, because it's all about the same thing, right? But generally, theme one is, what can we do now? What can we do in the next year or 2 years? We shouldn't be waiting for 5 to 10 years to get some of this stuff off the ground. I think the community expects it. You all should expect it. At the same time, how are you planning for the future? I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And what is that vision for the future?
Before you go too deep, we do have a question.
Thank you. And maybe it's more of a comment, but this is an extensive report, and it sounds like we're going to go into the next really big, heavy stuff, and I just didn't want to let it go without commenting that wow, that's amazing, and it was 2 years worth of input and data that was collected, and I just, want to say thank you, Mayor, administration, to the team who did this, because I think this is one of, if not the most extensive public outreach I've ever seen since I've been on this dais, and I look forward to having this discussion, but I felt like it was prudent for us to, comment on that, this is extremely valuable data that you have collected, and I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Cool. Thank you for sharing.
And Tony, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your background and your company's background before
Sure.
we...
Sure. We are, I'm an architect by training. I'm an urban planner. I'm based in Miami. I have offices in Brooklyn and San Francisco. We do transportation planning and public space planning. So for the transportation engineers, we're the public space people. For public space people, we're transportation planners and engineers. And we really think about how we design streets and public spaces as one sort of entity. And part of it is for the social benefits, but also the economic benefits. We just heard, people come to your public spaces and they spend money here. And that's part of where we're coming from with these recommendations. So the third item on our major themes is this item of stewardship. And that's going to come up over and over in each of the recommendations, in each of the big ideas. So the first big idea here is how do you start to, in the very short term, address something that Charisma was just talking about and that we heard over and over. The waterfront feels like it's not taken care of. The landscaping needs to be taken care of. The sidewalks have, bricks that are coming up. Just sort of normal everyday things that get lost in the shuffle of everybody's department focusing on their thing. And that's totally normal, but your waterfront, as you've just heard, is one of your major economic engines, and it deserves a special lens and a little bit more special attention to make sure some of these things don't fall by the wayside. And that also has to do with this feeling of security, and the homeless problem is a whole other sort of issue that's nested within this, but your perception of safety has to do with how well maintained the space is. And that goes from the landscaping, as I said, but also the programming. And you think about when there's a major event, how long does it take to get the tables and chairs all put away? Like, there are very little things, but when there's a model in place and these improvements that we're talking about, you'll be able to make sure that the space remains clean and picked up faster. Second, short-term upgrades to the waterfront. And this is a package of capital improvements that range from water fountain upgrades, improving bathrooms, to just thinking about the visibility and the sight lines throughout the waterfront public spaces. Stand in any of your waterfront public spaces, like the Meyer Amphitheater, for example. You can't actually see out. You've got the berm there. And there's a good reason to have the berm, but then there's also the other sort of thought, which is it blocks your view from the rest of the waterfront. There are small walls. There's all sorts of stuff in the way. FPL transformers and things that can be moved over time that don't need a big planning effort. You just kind of have to put it in your capital plan and get it off. And then there's other things like seating and shade structures, new trees. You've got a lot of palm trees out there, but the palm trees don't provide any shade. They're iconic in their way, but they're not giving people that sort of protection from the sun, which we've heard. I remember in all of our public meetings, people saying, I really want to spend time out there, but it's hot, it's too hot. And there's other things like, I remember a woman at our first workshop talking about how she really wanted to take her kids out there, but there was nothing for them to do. Like, what am I supposed to do with my little kids? Just walk around? So there are smaller play components that can be added to the waterfront relatively easily. These are really cool spinny chairs. If you've been to Little Island in New York City or San Francisco on Fisherman's Wharf, they're a lot of fun. You feel like you're going to fall. You're not going to fall. And they add a component of play that doesn't take a big planning effort, you know. Associated with this idea of short-term capital improvements are even smaller things that you can add to the waterfront. And that includes more shade structures that are movable, planters potentially, and then other sort of activities, programming that can be launched out onto the waterfront and removed potentially. Thinking about, again, at some of these public meetings, people said, well, we would love to go get a coffee there. If you're out on the waterfront edge, walking to somewhere where you can get a water or a coffee or an ice cream, it's not very quick. Like, once you've committed to leaving, you've gone, right? So is there an opportunity for a little kiosk for a little coffee or something small and something that's potentially movable on wheels or not? I mean, it could be something that's more permanent. Other things like a kayak rental and sort of water-based activities that might be temporary. And then also this idea of the branding and the marketing component. You're going to see this throughout the marketing or the programming side. How are you communicating to the outside world about all of these things that you're doing? Like the boat show has a brand, and Sunfest has a brand. All of these major events that come to your city have their identity. What is your identity, right? I'm going to get to this now in a second with the programming. This was a really fun, I think, and easy, low-hanging fruit project, which is just to create this loop around the lagoon. And you've got it in pieces. Start to think about how you connect it. Specifically at that northern end, there's a little bit of a gap there, not insurmountable. And when we went out there, we walked around, we figured out a way that might happen. But there's also the Palm Beach side. But it's more than just the infrastructure, because the path is there, right? Part of the path is there. It's the branding part of it. It's what are the other amenities? The bicycle parking. Think about water stations or refilling stations for, you know, water containers. And then this idea of programming. You've got over 500 events, large and small, that happen on the waterfront every year. We compiled everything. All the different departments, your internal programming, the programming that other people do. You know, I want to take my wedding photos out on the lawn or whatever it is. All of the things, 500 events, and they're not all yours, right? So, and even the ones that are yours are done by different departments. You've got Park and Rec, everybody's doing their own thing. And that's fine, but is there a more coordinated, unified way that you can do this? That is part of branding, and it's also the infrastructure associated with that. So do you have storage that's proximate to the site where you can store the tables and chairs so that you're not transporting them halfway across the city and waiting for people to come and pick up that stuff? I mean, every time I come out here, there's always stuff out there from some other event that happened recently. And it doesn't look terrible, but it doesn't have to be that way, right? So for us, some of the next steps for you all, for programming in particular, is think about, and this is in the data that Charisma was just talking about, think about the mix of programming. You've got really great regional programming that is attracting people from all over. What we heard time and again was there's not the everyday programming, the yoga on the lawn, the simple things that people can do for the residents of the city. It's not meant to bring people from elsewhere beyond the city. So create a programming plan that is intentional and curated that balances all of those components. Have a marketing strategy around that, And then think about also, we do this with our programming, think about creating a process for your vendors that is a coordinated set of FF&E, your furniture and your fixtures, the tents and the tables and all that. Make it look cute. This is West Palm Beach. It should look beautiful, right? Instead of just random white tents and like old janky tables, like it should be really pretty. You should come with if I'm a vendor, I should rent it for the day, pay my permit fee or whatever, but it should all be consistent and unified. And then finally, as part of this program curation, seek out people in the community that are maybe not doing that programming or not doing it here, and bring them to the waterfront. See if they can do Pilates out in the waterfront or whatever it is. Okay, so that was near-term stuff. All of that can be done in a year. I'm challenging you. This is for you all. Now, we're going to talk about the longer term. And the big picture here is your last waterfront plan was from 2004, I want to say, and you mostly implemented it in 2010. So we're 20 years out from your last planning effort, real unified planning effort. Not that there haven't been, there's short of core. There have been things that have happened. But your plan that actually led to construction, we're kind of stuck in the early 2000s. And there's nothing wrong with that. You implemented your plan, but now is the time to start planning for the next generation. And what are you going to do? What does that vision look like? Part of that vision, I think, and this is a controversial item, this was the most controversial, I think, is how do you address Flagler? How do you address it as a street that goes through your public space, as a part of your premier public spaces, not as a major arterial that goes along the waterfront? And we found the data shows you have about 10,000 cars a day on that street. It doesn't need to be as wide as it is. And your intersections, we've highlighted the intersections in the report that can at least immediately use some traffic calming, narrow that crossing distance, make it easier for people to actually get to the waterfront. So when we're talking about the actual water's edge, Flagler Drive is one of your biggest impediments, just in terms of size. And we put some street sections in the report. There's any number of ways of slicing that pie in terms of paths and number of lanes, on-street parking or not, apart from the intersection improvements. As a sort of corollary to the vision, all of this is really tied up with establishing a vision for the future. I wanted to call this out because I thought it was really important for you all to hear. People want to engage with the edge. They want to engage with the water. How are we allowing them? It's not just about getting in the water to swim or to kayak. There is a lot of other ways that you can allow people to have that engagement that is not just a seawall. You've got a serious seawall right now, and it's elegant and beautiful, but that's not the only way that you have an edge. The Netherlands has done this beautiful report. We referenced it in the document, where they show all the different ways that you can have a waterfront edge with natural features, with built features, with pools or other ways of engaging with the edge. So some of the next steps are to think about an action plan to expand access for small craft and improve the safety of the docks. And then this colors all of the visioning, and really everything that we do is, we heard time and again, resilience has to underscore all of the work that we're doing here. This is about economic resilience, but also environmental resilience. And so people wanted access to nature, even here in the most urban place. And you kind of get that when you're in a part of the lagoon and you're at the water's edge and you're under some of the shade trees that are there, you feel like you're in a different place. And so lean into that. That's working for you. People love that. And then finally, the big, I think the hairiest idea in this whole report, the one that's going to take all the brain power in this room, is what is the model that you're going to use to manage this thing? And who's responsible? This is one of your biggest assets. For me, the biggest thing that you could do is create an entity that is responsible for making sure that the programming is coordinated, that the sidewalks are taken care of, that the landscaping is taken care of, and that it's all working together. This is your big money maker, one of them anyway. Like, let's take care of it. So that's those are our 10 big ideas. I'll be here to answer questions.
Any questions, commissioners, on that aspect of it? Board?
I have multiple questions, but I'll start with this one. So you mentioned, an organization, and I obviously think that that's important. And I noticed one of the big key areas that you were talking about when it came to garbage, and I had a couple comments that we have a new group of people led by the DDA, picking up trash. We've noticed a change. You guys had 2 years, but this is like recent, I don't think we've had them for very long. So did you guys notice a change in that? Is that maybe something we're already on track with when it comes to some of the recommendations for garbage? But in particular, I wouldn't want to create another organization, and it seems like we have organizations existing that could fill in these roles. Obviously, a community-led one, Friends of the, Jupiter, like that makes sense. But in theory, we have the DDA, we have Parks and Rec, and so I would hesitate to create yet another body to run something like this, but that's just an initial thought when I was reading this.
Sure. The garbage related recent efforts, we haven't looked at that. That was after our recommendations. It's good that they were implemented because one of our recommendations was related to that. So this is actually the first I'm hearing about it. I'm happy about it. The type of entity, I think that's for you all to discuss. It couldn't be a separate entity, but if the DDA could do this for sure. I mean, it's within their purview, and the critical thing for me was, is there a person or a department within that entity that this is their thing? That all of the stuff that used to be in different departments now goes through them, and that they're the point person, somebody that the community can call on and say, hey, this isn't working, something's happening, rather than like, oh, that's Park and Rec does that, or sanitation does that. That's not going to work, and it's better for you all to have that point of contact also as city leaders.
Thank you.
After reviewing the report, one thought that came to me, pertinent to what you just said, is it might be appropriate to appoint a waterfront czar, for lack of a better word. Because there's a lot of, whether it's big ideas, quick fixes, but someone who is thinking waterfront 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, who would be a city employee that's their job. Just, from a marketing and branding strategy, from a maintenance strategy, from how do we come up with a stewardship model, rather than that being spread across different departments. I think it might be appropriate to appoint, and I'll have to look at budget and that type of thing, appoint a waterfront czar that's what they do. That's their full-time job, is how do we make this waterfront, how do we protect this asset of the city, and with this study, with this data as a foundation, how do we enhance our waterfront? So that's something I'm going to give some more thought to. Obviously, we'll bring it to the commission for discussion and approval, but I think that's the direction in which I'm thinking is probably the best way to head. Other questions, comments? Commissioner Lambert?
Thank you. Commissioner Ward, I am glad you brought that up. I think that is probably one of the biggest things that we should discuss because, Mayor, I agree. I think that having a point person, I think while there might be many entities that manage different aspects of it, just one of the things that came to mind in one of the slides and in the photos, there was this beautiful garbage can, and it was very colorful, and it was one of the ones that you pull open and you put in, and it looked so pretty in the photo. It was bright and colorful. However, I was thinking, I've seen some out here where people throw their trash on it instead of in it, and it just looks disgusting. And then you have to use a napkin to even open it and to use it. And I just started thinking, like, somebody's responsible for that, but do we have an entity or a person, a director who is responsible for overseeing all of these different entities that play a role in this, downtown area? Who will manage it? Who will verify that the things are being done? And I think that if, we're looking to invest in some of these suggestions, having that person or entity or whatever that looks like, I think will be essential because we want to protect our asset.
If I may respond to that and to the idea
Absolutely.
of the czar, having a point person immediately is important because none of this is going to get operationalized unless somebody's responsible for it, whether that's just the short-term stuff or the long-term stuff. So you do need somebody that's doing that. The trick is, what is the bridge that gets you to that person having a staff that can actually help them? Because we were working with Boston, for example. They have a person that does plazas. That is a one-man shop. And when he wants something done, he's got to call Public Works and get in line. And it's kind of this, then you're in the same boat. So that person has to have the staff behind him, the ambassadors or whoever, the DDA's support staff, that can help do the things. If somebody picks up the phone and says, hey, the garbage can is dirty, he can say, I got you. And call his people that are going to go out and do the stuff, not wait in line, because everybody's got their priorities already.
But again, that point is very well taken, but I think if we start with one.
You have to start with one.
Who can now identify
Yeah.
what resources he or she will need, whether it's staffing, whether it's infrastructure, anyway, but having someone, that's part of their job, is to identify what additional resources do I need, does this department need, do I need as a waterfront czar to really be effective at my job? I mean, we could speculate it here at this level,
Right, that's right.
but we need somebody who's living this and talking it and walking it every day, and then obviously take their recommendations, their requests to heart. But we got to start with one, I think, whose job is just looking at this report, looking at other waterfronts throughout the nation and the country, and
Yes.
figuring out best practices,
Yes.
and coming up with a strategic plan for the waterfront, if you will, which would include a requirement for funding, for staffing, et cetera.
And we actually, it's so funny that you say that. I mean, you read the report. One of our recommendation was to have a tour, go to successful waterfronts, take a field trip or field trips to amazing places so that you get your ideas.
Yes. All right, let's see who else has. Did I see other hands up? Commissioner Fox, and we'll come back to you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I also really appreciate the outreach efforts that included getting to people where they are instead of just the normal ways that we connect with people, to make sure that all the voices that were heard and not just those that live on the waterfront. I really appreciate all the work that went into this. I had one comment about the Lake Trail Loop, and it's something that I've talked to the city attorney about many times because it was during some of our litigation issues that we were having. It was a component that we added in that, should we want to move forward with the Lake Trail Loop at any point, that we now have permission from the building that is right in front of it to help us, move their dog park and get that connected. And I've also spoken to FDOT and the TPA, that now the MPO, about different funding sources that we might be able to access if we wanted to move forward with that. I know it's something I hear about a lot, and so I just wanted to make that comment for my colleagues that there are opportunities for us to find funding that doesn't just include city resources. But I wanted to ask a little bit about what you said was your most controversial item. Having Flagler Drive turn into a complete street. I think it's something similar that we heard recently in presentations about the downtown master plan. So I was curious if you had worked with anyone that's working on the downtown master plan to sort of coordinate this item, or if there's any, I guess, other ideas you want to talk about how you see this working in the future. I know on the walks that I went on with your team, it was something that we consistently heard about from the people that were on our walk, although in years past, not everybody was, completely supportive of this idea. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, or if you have any suggestions about, how to get the community buy-in for this.
Well, we haven't talked to the downtown planning folks. This was this predated that effort going on. I'm not surprised that they also have talked about it. You know, I know from the first time you tried to test this, there was sort of hiccups and roadblocks about that effort and the way that it looked with the tactical quick build version of it. I think you could. This is a political question more than anything, right? It's not a technical one. You could try that route again with much nicer materials and try to make it look beautiful. One thing that we heard, and I don't know if the data will show this, but the folks who live right close to the waterfront were some of the folks that necessarily did not like this idea. Not everyone. The folks that we went on the walk with were very supportive, but I think you'll get support from outside of the adjacent neighbors to actually have this happen. Other than a quick build version of it that is more elegant, I don't know. That's where I would start.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ward?
Thank you, and I appreciated all the different cities that you put in the back, and I was just in Copenhagen last summer, and I agree, they've activated their waterfront fantastically, whether it's young people going in the morning and jumping in off of some of the areas that they've built, or just lounging, and both residents and visitors alike really enjoy that, and I would love for us to be able to do that. I don't know where we have necessary room for it. But was there more detailed strategy of, hey, this is an area in which you could utilize, or we could actually have people hanging out by the waterfront, or I know you mentioned even the water taxis and pulling people to and from. So is there more in-depth that we can pull from to really discuss that, because it's very important? And obviously the big issue would be pollutant, right? Like, is our water safe? Did we look at that? Should we be encouraging people to jump in the water there?
Well, we did talk about the pollutants and enforcement of existing regulations right now, which we found to be light. In terms of the detailed design for that, that's the next step. That's what your waterfront czar's got to look at, is actually start looking block by block and where can you actually do some of this stuff. I think you'll find that there's enough room to do cool things and to engage the waterfront or the water's edge. It's a lot longer than you might think, but that sort of analysis has to be done next.
Mayor,
Did you have something?
Mayor, I'm sorry. I would like to add something to
Yeah,
Commissioner
sure.
Ward's response. In the report, there is a section where we looked at the utilization of the entire waterfront area. So there are some areas that are really significantly underutilized. There's not really any events going on, and it's one of the pages that has the map that goes all the way down, and it has pins on it that shows you the amount of time that those areas are activated. So some of those areas, as you're looking at, activating the entire waterfront, can be considered, because there's really not a lot of traffic. There's not a lot of foot traffic, vehicle traffic, or anything happening at those ends. And if you're looking at having people to walk with children and engage, those may be areas to consider as well.
Thank you.
I wanted one more thing to return back to the Flagler Drive. If you're going to do something there that is another test, you have to stick it out and make it last a long time, long enough to collect data and to see how it functions with all your events and just normal city life. It can't be something that lasts a month or 2 months and then say, well, we tried it out again and it didn't work. So if you go that route.
Thank you.
There are several ideas that would require extensive politicking, if you will. And so that is, again, I think, an advantage of having a waterfront czar. I got to come up with a better term for that. But anyway, who can work with, advise me and the commission as to what some of those big ideas are, and certainly work on strategy for how they could be implemented. But again, this is someone who lives and eats and walks the waterfront each and every day to come up with those, not only the idea, but an approach for getting the idea, a strategy for getting the idea adopted ultimately. Yeah.
Mayor, can I add something to that?
Absolutely.
Early on, when we began to do our engagement, exactly what you're saying is what we realized. There are a lot of city departments that have responsibility in the waterfront area, a lot of them. There are also outside organizations. You also have transportation organizations. You have county organizations. You have a lot of people that have interest in events and activities at the waterfront. It's very essential to have a quarterback, so to speak, an individual that is responsible for not just communicating with our government departments, but also working together with the nonprofits, the private sector. You have a lot of home developers and homes that are now there, being able to talk to these associations, being able to talk to the staff, being able to work together with transportation agencies. What we found is there's not a whole lot of collaboration between not just staff, but staff, county organizations, transportation organizations, and everyone working together to understand, so make sure the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. Sometimes it's just not happening. So one person, it seems like an amazing idea that I think that we should consider as well.
No, and it starts with one person, but if you think of the major assets of this city, it leads to a department, right? I mean, we do our water, whether it's treatment of water, whether it's waste removal. We've got sanitation. Those important functions of the city generally require a department. And I think we probably, as administration and commissioners, need to elevate our thinking as to what this waterfront really is. It is a significant asset of our city, which needs to be thought of in the same terms as other significant assets of our city, which will probably lead to a department. But we've got to start somewhere in terms of building the business case. So if we get a waterfront, I like the term quarterback for a number of reasons in light of yesterday's football results. But anyway, I like the term quarterback. If we get a waterfront quarterback that can kind of begin coming up with an implementation and strategic plan so that we can discuss that as a mayor and commission, that we could move toward implementation of that. But and just stepping back, I think our thinking has to be, this is a significant asset which needs to be discussed in the same terms of other significant assets of this city. And so yes, having a department where the buck stops with that department head, and they can then move, and as there are interdepartmental issues, that quarterback can now be the point person to work on that and make recommendations going forward. Go ahead.
And Mayor, also, it is a significant asset, but it is also a destination. That's one of the things that we really uncovered in here, that people are coming into the waterfront from all across South Florida and even out of the state, spending time to come to the waterfront. And so that was, elevating, like you said, elevating the perception of the waterfront, I think is very crucial.
Yeah. Commissioner Warren.
Thank you, Mayor. I really appreciate this conversation and some of the feedback that we've received in this very thoughtful report. And I think that it's clear that we all recognize that we have a lot of great departments doing a lot of great things, but that it's fragmented. And that there are ways that we should be looking at how we bring all of those departments together, those areas, including the DDA, including the CRA, including different entities that will come to the table regularly and look at how we're moving things forward. So I think this is great to look at it and say, hey, what are we going to do as a solution? I think czar, even though czar is a word that we want to come up with something different, is a great quarterback is a great place to start.
Jalen Hurts
is a great place to start, and then us coming together and figuring out how we support that quarterback with the appropriate departments and resources that they need before we move forward with that.
No, absolutely. And then let me commend the team for how thorough you were with collection of data. Because there are some things that I saw here that frankly surprised me. I didn't know. And it wasn't just the different layers of meeting, whether it's stakeholders or there's residents, business people, where they are, and then also comparing that to the foot traffic and that type of thing. And so just a very thorough job, and this data is very, very valuable, and I'm sure that the quarterback that we get in can utilize it. It's a good starting point. So I want to commend you for being creative and how you thought about the data collection. How do we get people's opinion? Because, as I stated earlier, it was very important that we hear from as many people as possible who are having interest in the waterfront, because it is, as I said, it's a city-wide asset. And so the citizens, the residents, the businesses of the city should have an opportunity to weigh in. And you guys have, I think, have done a great job of coming up with creative mechanisms for getting that input and helping us understand it. Let me see, anyone else? Commissioner Ward, then I'm President Lambert, then we'll go back to Commissioner Warren.
Thank you. I think this kind of ties into that same discussion, but the branding conversation I think is huge. And Charisma, to your point, this is not only an asset, it's a destination, and we should start looking at it that way. I think the discussion that we had and what I read in here about the multiple different entities that have events going on in our downtown, and so if we as a city are driving our residents and stakeholders to go to our website, we're only promoting the events that, maybe our events department puts on, and not even the events that we permit that we allow to put on, or just other things that are naturally happening. And if, whether it's this department or maybe it's some quasi public or partnership with the private industry as well to help us to manage all of that, because I think that that's a huge part of what we want to build here. And when I looked at those case studies, that's kind of what I saw in those as well. And it seemed like those case studies went in coordination with item number 10, which is who's stewarding this, what's happening here. And so, but one thing I wanted to just, and maybe this is a discussion moving from just questions on this, which is like what's next, is I really appreciate that you organized these in quick impact initiatives, quick wins, that, as you mentioned, Tony, that maybe some of these are even in progress now since we started this. I'd love to have a discussion with administration and staff on, what of these can we do now? And, I love the idea of, is there some kind of storage facility that we can start housing some items that then are branded that help us with this? And talking about shade and what can we do, because I was at the Green Market last weekend and with my daughter, and we're desperate to find some shade to eat some of the snacks we just bought. And all of the families of the Green Market were huddled underneath that tree that's right outside the Lake Pavilion. And I mean, it's true. And there was no room, and I squeezed us onto a little patch. But I think there's some great big win or easy win, quick impact initiatives that we can do. But I'd love to then take some time and talk about each of these big ideas that take more time and cost more money, because I think that they're great ideas as well.
Commissioner Warren.
Thank you. I saw in here where you identified that you use economic data analysis, and you referred to a Placer AI. Is that the only tool that was used for this, and is there any additional information that you can provide about what you gleaned from Placer?
Yeah, so Placer AI was used primarily for the foot traffic data, and then census data was used for the demographic population data. And Placer AI is a pretty robust platform. We do have probably more data than, we really consolidated what we had to put it in a readable format into the report. So there is more that is available from that. There are different things that we can request from them and purchase from that software to get different types of information. So yeah, it is a pretty robust platform.
And the collection of that didn't violate any privacy? We don't have any information concerning individuals?
No, and so that's kind of what's interesting about it too. The way the algorithms work and the way that they compile that data is in such a manner that there is no ability to tell any sort of individualism from it. There's certain thresholds of the amount of data that they need to have to even be able to utilize it, so that it's not, isolating a single or a few people. So that is, all ethically baked into that software. And yeah.
And that's a third-party company that we
Correct.
contract
Third
with.
party. This is nothing that the city collected.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Commissioner Fox?
Thank you. I think it's really interesting the demographic info that you provided, because on the one hand, you mentioned that the waterfront residents are significantly higher in age than the residents of the rest of the city, but that you mentioned that the income levels are lower, yet the home values are like triple the value of the rest of the city. I mean, I guess we can understand that downtown the values have gone up significantly, but you're saying that also the income levels are much lower in the project area. So I'm curious, just in terms of, obviously when we have something like the Green Market or Sandy, these are things that are for everyone, that everyone can find something at the Green Market no matter your age or income levels. But I think sometimes when you're looking at other programming, it's hard to say we're going to design a yoga class that's for every level, or whatever, a band or something that's for every level. So I guess are there other I guess recommendations that you had in terms of looking at how significant the benefit is for like Holiday in Paradise, for the restaurants and things that are on Clematis Street during that time? Obviously, we would love to be able to have something like that where the restaurants could benefit year-round. So I'm just curious, like, not just the yoga class as you suggested, but were there other recommendations that were more like steady seasonal activities that we should be looking at to, ensure that we're continually having more activation constantly and not just like a one-off here and there?
Demographic question. No, she was talking about
Well, I mean, we didn't get into specific other types. There was play, there was fitness. We heard from folks about varying the types of concerts so that it wasn't, just one type. There's a perception. I mean, we have to balance what we hear from the community. But what I would do first is take a poll, do a survey of what other things, everyday things people want to hear as a first step to the creation of that programming plan.
Commissioner Fox, as we were out looking not just, with the residents, but also looking from some of the other cities and some of the other data, when you look at long-term programming, a lot of it tends to focus on wellness. Very little, but you look at some of the case studies in there, there are ways that between the installations that are along the waterfront that activate them. For example, you'll see in the wharf, there's like a fire pit area that you can roast s'mores during the winter, but you can sit by it and put your feet up and kind of relax and do something else during the summer. So sometimes it's just with the types of installations that exist, whether it is the play installations for children. So it doesn't have to be event driven. The consensus is that they feel that the waterfront is event driven. So whether it is a yoga festival or something, they want regular installations that people can come out of their home on a Tuesday at 2 p.m. or a Friday at 8 p.m. or whatever time and enjoy the waterfront. It typically centers around, because whatever the tools are, they come out during an event. So there's a table, there's chairs, there's mats, only when there are events. When there are not events, if I just walk out of my home, there's nothing to do. And that's some of the feedback we were receiving. So it is the way that you design the waterfront. So there's regular, and if you look at some of the case studies, it can be from seating to shading to, sometimes there's art where there's interactive art. There's some parks here in Palm Beach County down in Boca where there's tech that is integrated into the art, so young people can come and they can, hit buttons and do other things. So you can, through the installations, make it so it's not event driven, because if we focus on more events, what are the types of events, then we do more of what they are already kind of complaining about. So just looking at how it's designed so that there's a long-term way that people can, sometimes we go out, we see chessboards that are just sitting out on, and again, these are just some things that we've seen in other parks and areas, but there are ways to just create installations that allow people to use it at any time.
And your task wasn't necessarily to come up with the full universe of possibilities.
No. Right.
You gave some suggestions. low-hanging fruit more long-term. But again, I keep going back to this idea of the waterfront quarterback. That will be, that individual will dig deeper into this data, and then that individual will come up with implementation strategies, both long-term, mid-term, and short-term, to bring back to administration and the commission. Also looking at best practices from around. So that will be the job of the waterfront quarterback, to kind of dig deeper and come up with specific strategies going forward. But this data is so key and so important, so they won't have to reinvent the wheel from that. That could be this could be the jumping off point for them to come up with a more defined path forward. Anything else? Other questions? President Lambert?
Thank you. I just, again, wanted to thank you all for the extensive outreach. I took notes on some of the things you said, that some of the in-person meetings led you to hear the stories, observe the body language. I think that those kinds of things, are very telling. Reaching low digital folks, people with language barriers, transportation barriers. I think that's phenomenal, and it helps us to have a very well-rounded report then to make these decisions and to have these discussions. And then, the next thing is just kind of looking at a very broad overview of this. What I'm hearing is, it's essential that we look at this with careful design eyes, that, there's a need for consistent branding, smart stewardship, and overall thorough communication throughout the whole time. And so that just leads me to my question. And Mayor, I heard you saying, maybe that this quarterback's role is to come up with, what's quick wins and big projects. My question was, what are next steps? And are some of these quick wins already things that we're working on that we can continue, or is the next step to explore hiring someone and creating that role?
Is that a question for me?
You or for Faye? Either one.
Well, my recommendation would be we would come up with a job description and begin that process. I got to talk to Ms. Johnson to see where we could find the money for it. But that would be my recommendation. I would urge that. We'll go through and see if there are some easy, low-hanging fruit types of things that can show the community that we've read the report, we've digested it, and these are some examples. I don't want to get too far ahead because we're still in this kind of fractured, if you will, administration of the waterfront. And so the more that we kind of roll out, the more we're feeding into that kind of fractured structure. So I really do want to move ahead expeditiously with exploring and hopefully implementing the waterfront quarterback idea. But we'll look and see if there's some low-hanging fruit that we could do in the meantime, such as maybe some more shade structures on the Great Lawn. That seems like something that we could address relatively quickly, and I'm just speaking from memory, so don't hold me to that. But we'll look for some of those low-hanging fruit types of ideas. But I think the most important takeaway from this morning's meeting and the report is that we designate, figure out the process to designate and hire a waterfront quarterback to really drill down and get deeper into what would be the appropriate strategic answer, reaction to this, to bring back to the commission and administration, because that will take time. And I don't want to. I'd rather be right than rushed. But what I will state publicly to you and the public listening is this won't be a report that just sits on the shelf and collects dust. I will do everything I can as mayor to begin the process that's necessary, I believe, to implement a more proactive, strategic approach to our waterfront, including exploring hiring a waterfront quarterback that could drill down deeper and come out with specific recommendations. But this will not sit on the shelf and collect dust. That's my pledge. Commissioner Ward.
I know as part of, President Lambert, thanks for your commentary. I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in these next steps that we can turn back to, including the shade structures on the Great Lawn and creating that promenade effect of activation. Some of the businesses here may have a small cart that they can go down to the waterfront and activate. I noticed also, obviously bigger steps when it comes to the connectivity of the lake trail and looking at the overall pollution regulations of the water. But I noticed one said the initiation of those seawall and waterfront edge, a study on that. I thought we had done that already, Administrator Johnson. Do we not have a more update seawall? Because I feel like that's what we discussed. We had FAU here and everything, that we've been doing those things to kind of be, thinking ahead.
Yeah, I was going to add a footnote to the mayor's comments that there are a number of the low-hanging fruit initiatives that are in various stages of progress, and so we certainly can provide the mayor and the commission an update, on those items, in addition to pursuing the waterfront quarterback, but certainly we can do that. And that would include the effort that you just mentioned, Commissioner Ward. We will go through and identify the various initiatives that are already underway and put those into some kind of report or presentation or an update via email, depending on the preference of the board, and then bring that information forward.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Fox.
Thank you. We touched upon a little bit the idea of kayaks and activating the waterfront in other ways with, we used to have jet ride, and it is something that has been missed by the downtown residents. They would love to see more ways to activate, to get on the water, to rent boats, or whatever that we are looking at, and the idea of a water taxi as well that maybe could go from, Northwood to downtown, or, it could actually be a mode of transportation that helps, keep cars off of our roads. But I just want to go on record. I know we didn't discuss at all the idea of any additional docks. And just, you've mentioned maybe some improved docking facilities for what we have, but I know it has been a point of contention with many in our city. So I just want to ask if you are recommending in any way that we are adding any additional docks or moving forward with a additional marina in the future. Thanks.
No additional docks, no marina. That didn't even come up in our conversations.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you again, team. This has been phenomenal. Did we introduce the young lady on the Zoom? Because she's been waiting very patiently. I don't know if she has anything to say, but I just feel like she's been sitting there. So
And she actually, this is Cassie McDonald. She works with me.
Okay.
She put together the recommendations.
Okay.
And packaged the report.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Cassie.
Thank you, Cassie.
Okay, thank you all very much. Commissioner, I don't have anything under mayor's matters. Anybody else have anything for the good of the order? Commissioner, President Lambert.
Thank you. Administrator Johnson, I know that about 3 weeks ago we had discussed having one-on-one meetings about the letter we received from FOP, and I appreciate your response that you'll be setting those up. I was just wondering if we have a timeline of when to expect those yet.
The briefings, I'm going to turn that over to the city attorney.
Thank you.
It's our goal to establish a time to meet with each one of you from the legal department individually.
So you'll be hopefully reaching
Yep.
out.
I want to
today,
schedule those for this week.
Okay.
The meeting should occur all this week before you
great.
get into the holiday week next week, yes.
Thank you.
Anything else for the good of the order? Okay, hearing none. Thank you all. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, staff and consultants.